Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But before I get started, I do like to go over some new announcements and discoveries I just found out about over the past week. Except for this one, I actually knew months ago, but I wasn't allowed to say anything about it. I've actually played the entire Legacy campaign, and this is for Sagrada Legacy. And if you haven't played Sagrada, it's an excellent dice drafting game where you're using the dice trying to complete different patterns, but then also try not to put dice of the same color or of the same value adjacent to each other, while also trying to stay within the limitations of the window that you're trying to create, but you do have access to some abilities that will help you along the way. But in this version of Sagrada, each window is going to be represented by a different page in a book, and instead of rolling dice and drafting them and placing those dice onto your window, you're still going to be drafting the dice, but you're going to be grabbing a pencil crayon of the same color, and then you're going to be coloring in whatever space in your window that you would like matching that colored die, and labeling it with its value. And if you are a fan of Sagrada, you'll definitely want to check this one out, because this one really impressed me, and they did a lot of things that were not possible with the original game, and there'll also be some hidden cards and items that players will unlock and discover throughout the game, giving them more options as the game moves forward. It's a really interesting game, and if you're interested in this one, you can go ahead and click that Notify Me button on their campaign preview page. And next we have a new expansion for Keyforge, and this one's also coming out in September. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a 2-player card combat game where players will be able to buy packs of cards, but unlike a lot of other card battlers where you're going to be taking cards from those packs and mixing them together, instead each pack is a complete set of cards that you can choose to use in a game, and every pack is balanced and unique, creating a lot of different strategies depending on the deck that you're playing and the deck that your opponent is playing. Players are essentially fighting back and forth, putting their cards out, trying to defeat their opponents by being the first to generate or steal enough resources to craft 3 keys. And this next one I don't have a date for yet, but there's going to be an expansion coming for Merchant's Cove, and I know this is a game that a lot of people are a fan of, so if you missed out on the original campaign, this is another chance to jump in on it. And there will be a big box solution provided with this expansion as well. And the last thing I want to mention is that if you do like these videos, you'll definitely want to go check out Boardgame Cove, because I do these videos weekly, but he does one each month, going over the following month, letting you know of all the campaigns coming up. So if you want to get a little bit of a peek into the future, you can go ahead and check out his videos. He also has a ton of other content covering all sorts of board games, all sorts of campaigns, and he provides a lot of details and opinions that could be really useful to you when you want to decide which campaigns you want to back. But of course, new campaigns are always being announced, and existing campaigns' dates are constantly changing, so you do want to check back here each week to get the most up-to-date information. With all that out of the way, let's check out the campaigns. And the first campaign we have launches on August 13th, and this one's called Full Sun, and this plays 3 to 5 players and takes 25 to 40 minutes to play. And this is a trick-taking game with a little bit of a twist. The theme here is that players are trying to create tricks of different types of trees, and each trick represents an amount of sunlight, but each tree only wants a certain amount of sunlight. So depending on the tricks that you're completing, you're going to want to complete only a certain number of them. You can also gain some additional points by correctly guessing how many tricks your opponents are going for, and you do have some information for that because the cards will actually show their suit on the back, and the suit of the card is the type of tree, so you know exactly which types of trees they have in their hand. You just don't know what values those trees are. And that's something pretty cool that I haven't seen in a trick-taking game before, and the game's going to play over a series of rounds, and of course the player with the most points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you're interested in this or any others mentioned in this video, I have links to this campaign and all the others in the description below. And launching on August 15th, we have Nanolith, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 1 to 2 hours to play. And this is a cooperative cyberpunk dungeon crawler with RPG elements, and players will be playing as 4 different asymmetrical characters with different stats and abilities. And this game does offer a full campaign, and something that's really interesting is the way that the narrative is provided. This game actually uses 2 different books. There's the encounter booklet and then the story booklet. And the encounter booklet's going to have a narrative that's going to walk you through the story until you eventually reach a lobby page. And the lobby page is just a page where players can choose to interact with different components on that page. And depending on what you want to interact with, it's going to direct you to the storybook. And then that's going to have more information about what you interacted with and the results of it if you choose to go forward. And the board in this game is also provided by the booklet, so players will be setting up their enemies enemies and points of interest onto that board. And then each round, all players will roll their action dice, and depending on the values that they get, they'll be able to spend them in various ways. You can use your dice for movement, and to do that, you just use the pips on the die as the amount of movement that you're able to do. Or you can spend a die to activate one of your cards, but in order to do that, the die needs to match the value on the card. And similar to this, you can activate one of your character's special abilities. And this works just like activating a card, except these usually involve using multiple dice of some different values, which makes them a bit more difficult to use, but they have really strong effects. As players perform different actions or engage with different encounters, they're going to be gaining stress, and this is going to be moving your stress token up your stress track. Whenever it reaches the end, you're going to reset it back to the start, but then you're going to be moving this red token one space to the left, making that stress track shorter. And this is not a good thing because each time that gets reset, you're also going to be taking 2 damage. But every player also has an ace up their sleeve because each player also has a powerful special ability token that they can spend at any time in order to unleash their character's most powerful ability. And the game continues like this, alternating between the player's turns and the enemy's turns, and if the players are able to fulfill the objectives of the scenario, then they're going to win the game. We don't always have to play the scenarios because this game will also offer a skirmish mode as well, and if this one sounds interesting to you, I have links in the description below. And also launching on the 15th, we have Journey into the Beyond. This plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a competitive tableau building game where players are competing to defeat a final boss. And at the start of the game, players are going to be choosing their champions that they want to play as, but they're also going to be choosing a final boss. And the game does use a board, and players will be putting a pawn out on the board that will represent their champion. And after that, the game plays over a series of rounds where players will be taking turns performing a series of actions, with the first one being the move action, where you can move up to 5 times on the board. And throughout the game, there'll be resources put out on the board called essence, and if you pass through any essence, you'll be able to pick that up. Wherever you decide to end your movement, you'll be able to take an encounter on that space, and the type of an encounter that you have depends on the space that you landed on. And these encounters could be different things like fighting a creature, resolving an event that has some sort of requirement that you're trying to fulfill, or resolving a room in a dungeon which has a sort of push your luck element, which works similar to the event, but if you are successful, you can choose to continue into the next room of the dungeon, and if you're able to complete that without failure, you can go into the third and final, and if you're able to do that, you'll get a much larger reward, but if you fail at any point, you'll lose it all. And then we move into the cleanup phase where you just roll a die, and each location has a value associated with it, and whichever value you roll on the die, that location is going to gain an essence. And combat in this game can happen in a couple of ways, either in one of those creature encounters, or if you pass through an opponent pawn. And whenever that happens, the attacking player is going to be the first to put out their effect and attack cards out on the board, so they're going to want to put out enough that they think they can defeat their opponent, but they might want to save some for later. And then the defending player is going to be able to play whatever cards they want, then you resolve all the cards, and players can deal damage simultaneously. You then resolve any effects depending on the cards that were played, and then this repeats until one player is completely out of energy, and then that player loses the battle. And whenever you die in this game, you're going to lose an item and then reset your pawn back to the starting location of the board. And once you feel ready, you can challenge the boss, and if you are the first player to defeat the boss, then you win the game. And launching on August 16th, we have Ivion Season 2 Winter's Bite. And for whatever reason, I thought this was launching last week, so I ended up filming it before I got to the end of the video and realized it was launching this week, so I didn't edit it, so I didn't previously release this, but I did already film it, so I'm going to be wearing different clothes in this next 2 minutes here, because past Adam decided to do all the work here. And this is a dual card combat game that plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes to play. And the way this game plays is that there's going to be a main play area made up of a 4x4 grid of terrain cards, and players will each be putting their player token on different areas of those cards. And then players will be able to craft their own deck from a selection of different heroes, and then the game plays over a series of rounds where players will be taking turns, and on their turn they'll be able to draw 1 card from their deck, and they'll also gain 1 initiative, and initiative can be used to move 1 space or to draw an additional card, so it gives you a little bit of an option there. And then players will also gain 3 actions. And there's a few things you can do with those actions. You can move around on the board, recover from negative effects that other players may have cast on you, or you can use those actions to play cards by paying the associated cost of the card. And of course, the cards can do different things like attack the other players or cause negative effects to those players that can slow them down. And they can also modify the terrain, making different areas more difficult to traverse out on the main play area. But something that I think sounds really cool and makes this game a little bit more unique is that there's actually going to be 3 cards that you'll be able to have access to every single turn that you have. And these cards could behave as normal cards, but they could also grant you passive abilities that you have for the entirety of the game. But once your turn is over, you'll still want to pay attention to what your opponents are doing, because anytime they play a card, if you have an interrupt card in your hand, you'll be able to play that and your card gets activated first. So depending on what the other players do, it might be advantageous for you to jump in and do something a little unexpected. And as I said, this is Season 2, so this is a game that's already out and released, and you can go ahead and try it for yourself. And I believe there's also a tabletop simulator version of the game if you're interested. But this new campaign is going to be adding 3 brand new boxes, and each of the boxes will include 2 specializations, 2 classes, and 2 miniatures, as well as some additional mechanics as well if you want to mix them into your game. And of course, it will be offering the previous content as well, so if you're interested in this one, definitely go ahead and check it out, and I have links in the description below. Also launching on the 16th, we have Forsaken, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play, and this is a sandbox adventure game where players are going to be attempting to establish themselves as a legend in the land, and they're going to be doing this whatever way they can, and each character has a personalized branching story that players can explore, and depending on the decisions that you make, the results can vary from game to game. Players will be navigating through their own personal story as well as a public story, trying to complete the objectives of both in order to earn legend points to make them the most renowned in the land. And this game offers a lot of different paths to victory. Players can hunt down bounties, perform odd jobs, fulfill prophecies, or even try their luck at gambling. You're probably not going to be choosing these randomly because you're going to want to pick the opportunities that have the best chance of success based on the gear, weapons, and skills that you were able to accumulate throughout the game. And at the end of a player's turn, they'll have the opportunity to trigger an event or an encounter, and these will have game-changing effects that can affect all players and permanently change the game moving forward. And of course, this can also grant you legendary points, because the bigger effect you have on the world, the more legendary you become. The first player to reach that level of reputation wins the game. And launching on August 16th, we have Trailblazers, and this plays 1 to 8 players and just takes 30 minutes to play. And this is a competitive game where players are going to be trying to complete different loops of trails. And there's 3 different types of trails that players are trying to complete. There's the hiking, biking, and kayaking trails. And for each of these trails, there is going to be a dedicated campsite. And in order to complete a loop, you need to create a trail starting and ending at the campsite that the trail matches. And this one is our Discord pick of the week, but this one is also my personal pick of the week. I'm a huge fan of this theme, but it also looks like a really fun game. And if you do like tile placement games, I think you'll definitely want to pay attention to this one, because this one looks like a lot of fun and like it presents a really nice puzzle, but then does it all in a really small package with a really small playtime. And each player is going to be starting the game with 3 campsite cards, with one of them matching each one of the different modes of travel. And then the game's played over 4 rounds, where players are going to be choosing one of those campsite cards to play out in front of them at the start of the round. Then you'll choose 2 trail cards from your hand to put out into play, and you're going to be trying to connect like trails to create loops to and from their associated campsites. But the nice thing here is that you can actually overlap trail cards with other trail cards, which gives you a little bit extra flexibility. But another interesting thing here is that whatever cards you don't play will get passed to the player on your left. So you might want to keep an eye on what they're doing so you don't hand them the exact card that they need. And since there's 4 rounds but only 3 campsites, this means on the final round you don't place a campsite and you'll only be putting out trail cards. And then after the final round, players are going to be adding up their score by counting the length of all their completed loops, but players can also gain extra victory points by completing different objectives. And there's 2 types of objectives in the game. There's the in-game objectives that players will be racing to try to complete first, because whoever does it first is going to get the most victory points from it. Then there's end-of-game objectives, where players are just trying to have the most of something, and that works the exact same way. Then players just add up all their points, and whoever has the most wins the game. As always, if you're interested in this campaign, I have links in the description below. And also launching on the 16th, we have Hike It, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a competitive survival trail hiking game where players are going to be hiking across the Smoky Mountains. And players are trying to gain the most victory points, and the way that you do that is by visiting different scenic locations. This hike is not going to be an easy one, so you're going to have to make sure that you're well fed and hydrated as you make it through the mountains, and also that you're taking advantage of the gear that you have at your disposal, while also avoiding the dangers and wildlife of the mountain that pose a threat. The game offers a detailed board of the Smoky Mountains that players will be able to navigate, and the mountains will always have some sort of active weather pattern and a 4-day forecast of what's to come. And you'll want to be aware of what weather's coming up because you'll want to make sure that you have the appropriate gear or that you have enough water to get through the heat or snow or rain or whatever the weather is throwing your way. But the thing that I like most about this game is that you do want to carry gear, but you don't want to carry too much gear because each piece of gear that you're carrying is going to occupy one of your movement spaces, so that the more gear you have, the less movement you can actually make on your turn. So you're going to have to find that balance, providing yourself with enough gear that you feel safe, but then still giving yourself enough movement that you feel like you can get to your next checkpoint. And the player that has the most points at the end of the game wins the game. Launching on August 17th, we have an expansion for the Red Dragon in Battle for Greyport, and this one's called Chaos in Copperforge. And this is a 2 to 5 player deck building game where players are trying to defend the city from hordes of monsters, where eventually you're going to be facing a final boss. And the game offers a whole bunch of different scenario cards for players to try to complete, with each of them having their own win and lose condition. And the scenario will also let you know which monsters and bosses to include in the scenario. And each player is going to be starting out the game with their own deck of heroes and items, and players will be able to modify this deck and upgrade it throughout the game, but players will also have their own character card as well, and this is going to start at the lowest level, but you will also be able to upgrade your character throughout the game as well. But the way that this game plays is that it's played over a series of rounds, and each player is going to be taking turns as the defending player. And what that means is that any monsters that are in front of that player are going to activate, as well as any monsters on any of the location cards that were part of the scenario. All these monsters will attack that defending player at the end of the round, and if that defending player ever dies, then the players lose the game. But even though there's only one defending player each round, all players get to perform their actions. And every player is allowed to play one hero from their hand as well as one item card. But the catch here is that your item card has to match the same type as the hero that you attach it to. And these cards can have different abilities that get triggered at different points in the round, or they can inflict damage in different ways, either with a set value, or they might even involve dice rolling. And every player is going to periodically have different monsters spawning in front of them, but whatever player is the defending player, those monsters in front of that player are the currently active monsters. Players always have to attack those monsters first before they can attack the monsters on the different locations. But the players really do want to try and defend those locations because you'll get a really nice reward if you're able to do so, and if you're not able to do so, you'll get some pretty harsh consequences. But once per round, you do have a special ability where you can move a monster from one location to another, which might be enough to tip the scales in your favor. Because there's so many different cards and so many different items that can be paired in different ways, and because all the players get to play simultaneously, there's a lot of room for chaining your cards in this game. So if you're a fan of creating those big, exciting chaining attacks, then this is definitely a game that I think you should check out. But after all the players have performed their turns, any remaining monsters will attack the defending player, and then any monsters still on a location will also attack that location. Then the next player becomes the defending player, and the game continues like this until you complete the objectives, or a player runs out of health points. The Chaos in Copperforge is going to be adding all sorts of new cards to the game. There's going to be new bosses, new scenarios, and new heroes to play as, but it's also going to be adding a new mechanism to the game, which is called the Contraptions mechanism, where you'll be able to upgrade the enemies in the game by giving them some special weapons. But the interesting thing here is once you defeat that enemy, you'll be able to add those weapons to your arsenal. And if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. And that's it for this week, but don't leave yet because we still have a couple awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. You don't have to subscribe, you don't have to like, all you have to do is leave a comment down below so I have something to draw from, and that will get you entered into this giveaway. And the first one we have is for a pledge for 535, and this one is a game where you're trying to get rid of all your cards first. And this is an interesting one because you're going to have numbered cards and you're going to be putting those cards out as different sets that you're trying to get rid of, but then the next player can try to put out a same set of a higher value or add to your existing set if they are able to do so. If a set ever expands over 4 cards, then you can wipe that entire set and play a new one. And that's a really great strategy for trying to get rid of the cards that are harder to remove from your hand, but there is another way out because the 8s are special in this game, and anytime you play an 8 in any set, you can go ahead and wipe the cards and go again. And this giveaway is going to be for a pledge for a copy of the game. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag 535 and leave us a fun fact that just has something to do with numbers. And in case you didn't know, I am an engineer, so I'm pretty familiar with numbers, but I am also a man of many skills. And there is a number known as 145, which is very prevalent in music. And the way that it works is whatever chord you start on is your 1, and then you just move up 3 more times to hit that 4, and then 1 more time to hit that 5. And whatever chords those are, that's your chord progression. So if you were to start with a chord such as E, then you would just go E, which is your 1, F, G, and then you go back to A, which is your 4. And then after that you have your B, which is the 5th. So you go 1, 4, 5. And then you can make some hit songs such as La da 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 bam ba. And I thought I had another giveaway, but that was actually the only one I have this week. So let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway, which was for a pledge for Wicked Ones and the Undead Awakening. And to draw a winner, use this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are extra entries from my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content, you want to help support the channel and make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me, I truly appreciate it. And there's a link to my Patreon down below. It also gets you bonus entries into these giveaways, which is always a nice thing. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner is Elaine Brousseau, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers, so congratulations. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Wicked Ones. And that's everything I have for you this week, so until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.